thank you very much for putting together this panel. I'm really happy that I'm speaking with Ed, bringing together the activism that's going on here to end the drone warfare, and also bridging that connection with what's going on in Pakistan. I think that's the only way that this will come to an end, is if we bridge sort of the connections between both sides of the conflict and the people who oppose both the conflict on both sides.
Can I lower the mic so it's not in your face?
Sure. So I'm just going to give my thoughts on what kind of war emerges from the drone program, looking specifically at the case in Pakistan, and sort of show some of the main reasons why we should oppose this war from the Pakistan side, or the side of those being targeted. Primarily, the drone program fails to address the fundamental reasons why militancy even exists to begin with. There are huge civilian casualties, no accountability, and essentially exacerbates the problem of poverty and the disenfranchisement of those people that are living in Pakistan that are being targeted. So just to give an overview, drone strikes have been taking place in Pakistan since 2004, but really escalated in 2008 under Obama. So this is really Obama's war, without a doubt. And the drone strikes are taking place in a portion of Pakistan called the Northwest Frontier Province, which is on the borders of Afghanistan. This is a tribal region, has historically been isolated from the rest of the country. It is subject to its own laws, even predating the formation of Pakistan in 1947. So, first of all, I've never been to Waziristan. Most people who are, opposing drone strikes have never been to Waziristan, which is where the majority of the strikes take place. Most of the information we have is secondhand information. The Pakistani government does not allow you to get into that part of the country. So everything we know is secondhand, and so that only adds to the lack of accountability and the suspicion that sort of surrounds this program. So there's been a lot of back and forth about how many people have died. The best account has been provided by the Bureau of Investigative Journalists. They have sent in people into Waziristan and also have looked more critically at some of the mainstream media accounts. But approximately 3,000 people have died from the program. As I said, there's a lot of inconsistencies. The mainstream media will report that 4 to 6 militants died. And they say that we use the word militants. And for example, on October 31st in Waziristan, there was a drone strike, 4 to 6 people died. But at that same time, a lawyer from England, Clive Stafford Smith, who is the head of Reprieve, which is a human rights organization, was there at the time, and he documented that, in fact, 2 of the people that died were 16-year-old boys who actually had volunteered to collect information on the drone strike. So, from small bits of anecdotal evidence, we know that what is being said doesn't really correlate to what's going on. And there's ongoing work as we're speaking by friends, comrades who are trying to just get more information of who is being killed, who is being affected. But we know clearly that there's a huge civilian toll from these attacks. So as I said, 3,000 people have died, and the deadliest month was September of 2010. And I mentioned September 2010 in particular because that was the month in which Pakistan was suffered from the worst monsoon floods in the past 40 years. So 20 million people displaced, thousands dead, and literally every single day there is a drone strike in the other part of Pakistan. I mean, this really illustrates the sheer cruelty of the situation, and it just that there's no understanding of the humanity of these people, and sort of why there's no understanding of why would militancy exist in a region where there's been no rule of law, no accountability in general. So that's that's sort of the big picture. Here in the US, the government has not acknowledged formally the drone program in Pakistan. Earlier this month, Eric Holder, Attorney General, went on record and offered some insights on whether on the justifications for this war. But prior to that, the government has not actually gone on the record and said that there's a drone program. And I'm just going to read a very absurd interaction between John Brennan and a senior staff attorney at the ACLU on the drone program. So his name is Ben Weisner. So Ben Weisner is asking John Brennan, does the CIA have a drone program? And this is in a press conference. Brennan says, well, as you know, covert actions are designed to be covert, and therefore, and then Weisner says, and therefore you only read about them in the newspaper. And Brennan says, well, if the agency did have such a program, I'm sure it would be done with the utmost care, precision, in accordance with the law and our values, if such a program existed. So this is the level of absurdity that the secrecy has reached, right? Everyone knows about it, but the government won't acknowledge it and invokes state secrets basically to serve its own purpose. And at the same time, John Brennan earlier in the year stated that not a single civilian has died from the drone wars, and that's absurd, right? That's probably the first war in the world there's not been a single civilian casualty, right? So, you know, what really we're seeing is sort of a complete lack of accountability on both sides. We don't know how many people are dying because Pakistan, we're not allowed to go to those areas because of the way in which Pakistan has sort of permitted this tacitly. And then on the US side, there's an ongoing struggle to get the justifications, to get the documents and the kind of intelligence that is leading to these attacks. So, you know, nominally the US claims that they're targeting 3 primary groups, the Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan, the Haqqani network, and then Al-Qaeda. And that's who they say they're killing. And we don't really, I mean, we only know there's through leaks, right? We actually haven't, there's been no, for each strike, we don't have the intelligence that tells you why these people have been designated as militants. But there are 2 kinds of strikes that have been distinguished. There are signature strikes, which are target groups of men believed to be militants, but whose identities are not known. And then there are personality strikes. So, you know, which are, you know, the leader of Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, Fethullah Masood. So they know exactly, or they allegedly know exactly who they're trying to kill. But the great majority of strikes are these signature strikes. So there's no, we don't really know. The government itself admits that they're not really sure of the identities of these people. So, I mean, if that's what the government is willing to concede, we can imagine that this is just, this is largely a war on civilians, of people who have very weak affiliations with these militant groups. So, as I said, the kind of war that emerges from this is a war with no accountability, no concession of error, and it's completely asymmetric, right? So, you know, we have the drones that go into Pakistan, right? They hover up to 24 hours before they launch their missiles, emit horrendous noises, and the local populations have resorted to taking sleeping pills, anti-anxiety medicines. There's been a certain amount of people shifting, but because this area has literally been blocked off from the rest of Pakistan, there's very little that people can do. They're trapped in, you know, in a prison of sorts. And the information that comes out is just, it's like pulling teeth. And you know, what the drones have permitted is an expansion, complete expansion of the battlefield, right? It reduces American disincentives to go to war, and under the guise of a surgical, antiseptic, precise war, we are told to sort of give up our suspicion and just distrust the government and its intelligence. But we know what kind of intelligence it's relying on. I mean, given how easily the word militant terrorist is assigned to people, we should be, you know, very, very skeptical of it. So I'm just going to speak a little bit about what I think is an important dimension is the way in which the drone program fits into the U.S.-Pakistan relationship. Because I think that, you know, we hear a lot about Pakistan. There's a lot of blaming of Pakistan playing the double game in Afghanistan, and you know, Pakistan has become an important ally, or tense ally with the U.S. So basically, you know, the Pakistani government cannot say in public that it has consented to the drone program, right? We cannot say that because it's politically, it's political death for them to say that. At the same time, we know that they have allowed this because the drones take off from air bases in Pakistan. There's no other way for them to take place, for that to take place. So, but what it allows is a shifting of accountability, right? So the Pakistani government can say, oh, well, we haven't allowed this. We're not responsible for these deaths. The U.S. government has, and then the U.S. government says, no, well, the Pakistani government obviously has allowed us to do this, otherwise we wouldn't be able to do it. So there's just, much of the game is just shifting blame between these two parties, and meanwhile people are being killed. And it's, in a sense, strategically it works, it works for both governments. At the same time, the U.S. has been pursuing a very, a carrot and stick approach with the Pakistani government to get them to eradicate terrorism. So, the U.S. has pushed the Pakistani military to engage in offensives in other tribal regions and to get rid of, the terrorists. That has led to, a huge amount of displacement, huge amount of internally displaced people, and that's simultaneous with the Afghan refugee crisis. So you have two sets of people who come down into the cities of Karachi, and you see the ethnic class tensions that take place when you just have an influx of people coming into the cities that are already overburdened, have no social resources to take care of these populations. And what you have is the Pakistani government terrorizing its own people because the U.S. is telling it to get rid of terrorism. And so you have actually a replication of the national security state that you see in the U.S. in Pakistan. People held incommunicado, disappeared persons, no judicial process, and this has really served the Pakistan government well to a certain extent, right? Because every time the Pakistan government takes certain steps towards eradicating militancy, more military aid is given. At the same time, the drone program has come at a huge cost to the Pakistani people and to the establishment, because we are seeing a resurgence, a surge in attacks by the Tehreek-e-Taliban in city centers in Pakistan. So that's huge cost for people, everyday people. But then the U.S., the Pakistani government has to come up with a way to sort of deal with its double dealing. Ultimately, what the drone program does, it just systematically fails to address the root causes for militancy. So let's even take at face value that this is really to eradicate militancy, and militancy is a problem. Let's just take that argument, and there are many problems with that. The drone program, killing people, is really not addressing why the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan Haqqani network exists, right? The Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan came out of a particular context to establish the rule of law in a place where the state had no presence. Haqqani network is the retreated, controls certain parts of Afghanistan and the insurgency, and they exist in Pakistan because, there's an artificial border that's been drawn between Pakistan and Afghanistan, I think that's an important thing to address. And insofar as we care about ensuring peace and justice in Pakistan, the drone program does not achieve that at all. You're terrorizing, essentially it's terrorizing the local population. There's this repeated trope as Pakistan as this, you see this on the right and the left, right, saying Pakistan is this very scary, dangerous, mysterious place. Yeah, there are parts of it that are very scary, but that doesn't explain why it's scary. It's scary because of this incessant war, this covert war, and the U.S.'s hand in basically cementing the military's authority in Pakistan. And as I'm not sure if people are aware, Pakistan has been under military rule for a great portion of its short existence, and so this only furthers it, because essentially it shifts priorities from dealing with issues of poverty, class struggle, and militancy to just war making, and that just that's the Pakistani military. This is good for the Pakistani military brass. So there's a lot to be said about the legal aspects of this, but I don't have much time. I want to keep it short. So would people prefer if we talked about this in the Q&A, or I don't know, what would you guys prefer? It's sort of up to you.
Can you give us a succinct overview? I think that's important for people to be able to Q&A.
Okay, sure. So there are two aspects of this, right? So the U.S. government plays lawfare, right? So it uses the law to rationalize what it does in very distorting ways, and essentially is completely emasculating the fact that we have a framework in line that's not too bad, right? That says that you can't kill people whenever you want, right? That's why that's why the laws of war, it regulates how you can kill people, right? And so there are problems with that because it allows you to say that you can't engage in war. But the U.S. government basically uses the laws in very innovative ways. It both asserts that there's self-defense and that there's an armed conflict. And doesn't really clarify whether it's working under a self-defense argument, whether it's trying to defend itself, or whether there's an active armed conflict in Pakistan. So that's one issue. The other issue is that when we look at the drone strikes, we have to look at each drone strike separately and say, who is it trying to kill? Who are the government saying they're trying to kill? What are the civilian casualties that have resulted from it? And in which context is this operating? So the U.S. government has given 3 reasons for why it could engage in war. That it's a spillover, the war in Afghanistan has spilled over into Pakistan, that the Pakistan government is at war with its own people and the U.S. is just supporting it. Sorry. That the U.S. is supporting this internal war. And then finally, there's an independent armed conflict that is separate from Afghanistan, separate from Yemen, that's taking place. And each of these justifications fails to map up to the actual facts on the ground. And so that's, that's what I'll say, right now for on that end. But I'm happy to talk about, the legal aspects of it. My critique is that, a lot of it, this legal, it won't really. I don't know how far it will get us. Right? We can use it strategically. The language may be powerful. I don't know if the courts are open to it. And the law itself is not as good as where it should be. And then I can also talk about a little bit about what what groups have been doing to take action against the drone strikes. But we can talk about that in the Q&A.
Thank you so much.